Welcome back to Timeless Mindset. In this episode, we are joined by Kirsty Peebles. She's a holistic business coach, personal trainer, and self-anointed dog mum. From starting her own business at 17, owning a gym a few years later, selling personal training sessions on Gumtree, being in a toxic relationship, and a relationship ending in a conscious separation from her fiancé. Her journey is a huge personal development story, and we are here to unpack it all and learn the lessons. Expect to learn about Kirsty's business and life journey, how to reflect whilst taking action, how to listen to your intuition, consciously separating from her fiancé, why you need to follow the threads of excitement, how to become a student of life, how to rethink about the pain in your life, plus so much more. I love this conversation, and I definitely learnt a lot from the way she approaches life and the way she frames her decisions. So yeah, loved having her on and hearing about her journey. Before we begin, are you in Perth and love looking after your physical and mental health? We all deserve to give our body the love it needs. Look no further than Perth's newest and best recovery centre, Rec Lab. It's located in Wembley and has everything you need. 2 huge ice bath plunge pools, a 39-degree magnesium hot pool, a steam room, traditional sauna and hyperbaric chamber. And more importantly, the owner, Pete, is an amazing individual, and the people who go there are incredible. It's a great community, an incredible facility, and it's just such a great space to give your body the love it needs. The link to his website and Instagram is located in the show notes below. Make sure to mention myself, Egan, when you visit, and I'll make sure he looks after you. Let's get into it.
Everyone is going through something.
I think that you can actually do anything you set your mind to.
If someone were to ask you who you are and what you stand for, you should be able to answer that question.
You got to be grateful for where you're at.
I don't really want to have all these cuddles. This is your role. Step up.
Kirsty Peebles, welcome to the podcast.
Egan, thank you for having me.
All right, so I was thinking, give us a little bit of a snapshot of where life's at right now, and then we'll take it right back to the start of the journey and sort of connect the dots, understand the timeline, and talk about the lessons along the way.
Okay, I am so intrigued to see where today ends up because I don't know what's going to happen, but where I am at currently, and I deeply believe that we are ever-evolving human beings. You could ask me again in 2 weeks and I'd be a completely different person again. But today, I am currently a holistic business coach for wellness-based and fitness-based professionals. I am a dog mum to my beautiful Australian Shepherd, Max. I have an incredible partner. He has totally transformed my life, truthfully. I own my own home. I live in Perth, as the people listening to this podcast may know, and I am really working on integrating my last 10 years of my life, bringing that all together like a giant puzzle piece and starting to actually look at that from an above perspective. So I believe that I've been doing probably a lot of action-orientated moves, a lot of growth, a lot of changes for a really long time. I don't think that will change, but I'm finally learning to integrate. And as you and I had a voice note when we first started talking about actually being able to reflect on what we've done and how far we've come, it's not a skill that I've ever really had until this year, I would say.
And it's hard to understand, I guess, the journey until you're sort of out of a lot of things.
100%.
A lot more clarity and understanding of what's actually changed within you. But I think that's great that a lot of your journey has been fueled by action.
Yeah.
Instead of I don't know, I think a lot of people get stagnant and stuck. But I think action is great because eventually in time you can understand the evolution that you've gone through.
100%. Yes, absolutely.
How do you feel about attaching labels to yourself? Because I feel like anyone in life, whether it's a standard 9-to-5 job or, they're a coach, you sort of have to attach a label holistic business coach, but then in 3 months it might change. How does it feel? Because I struggle to be comfortable attaching labels to myself just because I don't want to get pigeonholed into what that entails.
truthfully, something I have resisted for a really, really long time. I had a point last year where I was like, screw the boxes, get me out of here. I felt very, that was something that I've struggled with for a really long time. I didn't know how to explain myself. Literally the question that we just started with, it's a really hard question for I think most of us to answer, because we are constantly learning ourselves. We are constantly trying to figure out who we are. And most of us, like, that's the most terrifying journey we ever go on. The most fulfilling, but the scariest. And we can try and not be the dog's mom and not be the partner and not be the business owner and not be this is my job title. But truthfully, holistically, that's just what makes all of us up. Is everything that we are and everything that we do. So I don't think that labels ever get easier. I believe they just help. I try to look at them now as a way for other people to understand you and another way for people to try and gauge whether or not you're the right person for them. And that usually comes from our values.
Yeah.
So it's not something I'm great at still, but I am working on that as well.
I had Boris on the podcast, the spiritual hypnotherapist guy, and asked him the exact same question, and he said, I'm a naive monkey of this. So I think, it's really... We're
all a mess.
We are.
We are all giant children running around trying to figure it out.
I think that can provide a sense of peace. I feel like the more I understand that we don't have it figured out, the more people I've interviewed and realized that, they have skills and knowledge, but they're still, they still don't have it figured out. A lot of successful people in life. I think that can provide a sense of relief, which can, if you can transform that into a sense of confidence and belief, I feel like, it can change your life, that perspective shift.
Absolutely. Self-compassion was the word that I really was just thinking about as you were talking about that, because it allows you to meet yourself where you're at and have enough love and then exude confidence to be like, okay, I am going to mess it up. I don't know what I'm doing. Most people don't know what they're doing. And when we look, quote, up to people, something that I learned a really long time ago is every time we put someone on a pedestal, we put ourselves in a pit. And it means you're looking up to somebody. And you don't deserve to put yourself down just because you have someone that you aspire to be. You're on an even playing field regardless. And when I heard that and when I conceptualized that properly and actually started to think about it in my life, I started to realize, like you said, the peace and the humbleness that comes with the fact that every single person has their own shit. Every single person has things they're trying to figure out, areas in their life that's chaotic. At the end of the day, we all have to have a shower and go to the toilet, and we do weird things when we're by ourselves. It's like everyone is a mess and everyone is figuring it out.
How do you embrace change with this sense of labels? Because I know for me, the reason I don't want to put labels onto myself or sometimes take action is because I know inevitably I'm going to change, and then it's like I'm almost getting secondhand embarrassment from my future self from that, like the perfectionism voice. But it's like you'll only understand, and the perfect solution only exists in hindsight with the perfect information, and that perfect information is only available when you go through the journey. So it's like, I don't know, that's perfectionism in a nutshell. But I think with labels and, I don't know, taking risks in life, it can be really hard.
Definitely. So are you saying, how do I handle change, or how do I handle pivoting in life all the time?
I think that mindset shift of, we are going to change, and that's okay. And it's going to be this, uncertain evolution, but I can still take action now, even though I'm unsure of how it's going to play out, because my mind has been conditioned to want to understand every step of the way. But that's not possible. And the best choice for me is probably not going to be understood until in hindsight. But I have to take action now if I'm going to get that information.
Yeah. I realized from quite a young age that I was different to a lot of people in terms of the way that I think. And I have started to recognize that change is my superpower. Like, I actually froth it and I actually actively look for it, because once you start to develop a strong enough relationship within yourself to have a level of self-trust and to have a level of, again, confidence, to be like, every single time something changes, something better comes up for me. Like every pivot comes with its own beautiful aligned situations. And I'm not going to lie, this just might be my age talking, to be like, just every time something like that has happened in my life, it's been 100% for my highest good. And I don't know, maybe that's where my faith or spirituality comes into it, of having that deeper belief that no matter what, I know that this is playing out in the way that I'm supposed to, in a way that is for my highest self, my best self, my future self. Like this is where I am supposed to be.
Where does that change start? Take us back to the start. I guess when you started, pivoting from the traditional pathway and doing your own thing, where does that journey begin?
Like any oldest child who is also a perfectionist, who is also probably come from a relatively everything needs to be amazing all the time perspective, I was a dancer, and I suppose that's where that fits in as well. When you're dancing, you are judged wholeheartedly. And to be honest, with most sports, you're judged wholeheartedly on how you show up and how you look and what you're doing and how you're performing. And I think I always had that inner drive to be really good at whatever I'm doing. The big changes that I would make that, as you said, would kind of set me apart from other people probably started when I was 17, 18. I didn't really second guess starting my business at that age. I think it's a very uncommon thing now. Well, most 17-year-olds are still in school. I was 16 when I graduated, but I guess I just have always, I can't explain it, and this is just one of those soul things where you just know this is meant for you. I just always realized that I was meant to do more, and I wanted to do more. Like my soul was not okay with standard pathways, and like most entrepreneurs, you struggle your way through high school and you, how do I word this? Undiagnosed spicy brain, trying to figure shit out all the time and constantly evolving. But I just got to a point where I was like, I just don't want to do the things that are available for me. So I'm just going to make my own.
How does your upbringing integrate with this? Because I know for a lot of people in the entrepreneurial space, there's sort of a blend of always not believing that, their soul didn't want to do the traditional path. They had more for them. But then there's always like that combination of an early experience that sort of catapulted that into existence. So I don't know, for a lot of people, like their parents either didn't work a traditional 9 to 5 or, they were told they were never good enough. So they set out to prove themselves in a non-traditional way. Can you identify any experiences for you that have sort of accelerated that?
Yes. Truthfully, I had a really beautiful upbringing. I'm really blessed. My parents are still together. I love my family. We all get along really well. But if I'm really honest with us, with you, with myself, is I watched... So neither of my parents are self-employed. There's actually only one uncle an auntie and uncle in my family that are self-employed. Everybody else is a 9 to 5 job or like 6 till 6 job. And not that I looked at them and was like, oh my God, that's what I want. But I did watch my mum give up her life. I'm not going to say life.
Dream?
Dedicate most of her time to us children. And I am someone who, up until like in the last year, I wasn't even sure if I would have kids. I still don't know how I feel about that, truthfully. I know that's a very polarizing and confronting conversation in itself. But I watched my mum give up so much of her time and so many of her dreams, and becoming a mum was her whole thing. And I'm so grateful for that, because truthfully, it's what's led my brother and I to be the way that we are. And I would say we're pretty good kids and we're doing pretty good things. But I was like, I need something outside of that. That's what I need. And like Dad worked in the mining industry. He had a job. He's always had a job. he's always been in leadership roles, but I definitely was like, I never want to or need to financially depend on a man. Not that their relationship was ugly. I just was like, I just don't want this. I want to be able to look after myself. I've always been described as a very independent, confident person. And I guess maybe with some control issues sprinkled in there, being self-employed meant that I could have the independence and I was in control of both my success or my failure versus I'm going to show up to a job, shouldn't be fired, but could be fired, or here's your cap, like can't go any, like this is as far as you can go with that. And I just, coming back to the boxes conversation, I don't like boxes. I don't love labels. I want to be able to evolve however I want to evolve, and recognizing that I wanted to look after myself was probably really what changed that.
When did you first experience that inner voice, that calling for something more? And when did you first start taking action on it?
I don't think I identified it until I was in my early 20s. I would say that it was there when I was about 18, 19. That inner voice I would call intuition. Other people might call it your soul, your whatever, but I would call it your intuition. But my inner voice, I just had this inner knowing. My gut has always been very strong, and my intuition has always been very strong from hard lessons that we have navigated earlier on. But I would say that when I was 17, 18, setting up my business for the first time in the parents' garage doing PT sessions, I just was like, I actually really love this. This is like a whole other life that I never thought that I would go after and go into. And because it was the best decision that I'd ever made, I was like, well, I just need to keep trusting this. Being outside of the box is fun, and I'm intrigued to see where this goes. And in terms of strengthening my intuition and knowing that I was different is probably the right word, different from the classic 9 to 5, is that I've always been a very curious person. I've always asked why when someone has told me what I need to be doing. I was always questioning teachers, and they're not in a disrespectful way, but if you're meant to be in charge of me, I want to know that you know what you're talking about, which is wild when I think about it. I literally we're going back now to the childhood. When I was in year 5, when I was in year 5, I actually had an instance where I fronted up to the teacher. She yelled at me and told me off that I was talking, which, look, truthfully, I would believe. But on this particular instance, I knew that I did not. And I had the whole class, they were like, she wasn't talking, Kirsty wasn't talking. And I remember just crying. I was so distraught and so upset this teacher didn't believe me. She totally was putting me down. And I remember standing my ground in that moment. And I guess, again, I don't even know why we're talking about this, but I guess in that exact moment, it was like, okay, no, standing my ground has, it's kind of not paid off in this minute, but the next day it led to an apology, and mum came in and was like, if Kirsty was talking, I want to know, but I've called 3 other children's parents and I've heard from them themselves that she wasn't, and I just want to know what's going on. And I guess that was when my independence was encouraged, even though it was a little scary. And I genuinely think I've just been that way ever since, to be honest.
Isn't that amazing how in that one moment you it's hard. You probably lost that moment, but in the long run, you've almost internalized such a powerful lesson, which is the short-term pain for long-term gain.
Yeah, I genuinely I haven't thought about that memory for a really long time.
But I think when we're kids, we don't realize how sensitive and critical a period it is. And for you to remember that, it must mean something. So, yeah, it must have played a little bit of a role. But I think that's fascinating. That you still you had the courage to stand your ground, because I know a lot of people are afraid to speak their truth. And, even when they know and they believe, it's so easy to be influenced and guilted into believing what other people say. So Absolutely. It's interesting that you've had this, sense of independence and strength from such an early age?
Again, to be honest, that could be from dancing. Like I always say, if I ever have a daughter, she will be in some kind of performance environment that is forcing confidence to grow within kids, that is forcing them to make mistakes and be able to pick themselves back up and keep going and really hold their own, because that's something that so many people don't have. And yeah, if I really connect those dots and intertwine them together, I would say that being the dancer meant that I always had to pick myself back up and I always had to keep going and I had to hold myself. And then I guess that just transformed into other areas of my life as well.
What happened next? So started the PT in the garage. Where does the journey go from there?
Yeah, it's been a big one. I would like just to thank ChatGPT for telling me this information before I got here today. I actually looked up, I said, what is the percentage of personal trainers making it through their first 3 years, 1 to 3 years? And it said 50 to 90% of PTs do not make it through their first year.
What do they end up doing? Like,
honestly, what I have noticed, they become cops, they become car salesmen, and they're real estate agents, or I don't know, they probably just go and get a corporate job.
So it's still in a position of like voice, you know what I mean?
Yes,
yeah.
I don't know if leadership.
Communication, something like that.
Yes,
yeah,
that's
talking,
the best word.
Sales, people. Yeah,
people. Okay, where the journey evolved from there, I would say that my first few years of business were quite slow, and in the same way that most of us should be doing in our early 20s is just building our skill set, just learning as much as you possibly can, because at the end of the day, if you have the skills, everything else that you want will come from that place. You have to start with that pillar.
Did you know that at the time, or was your mindset like take action, keep doing things, and you learn, and now you're like, geez, knowledge is so powerful, but you didn't realize that at the time?
I am very grateful to, yes, I would say that I have always known how important it is. I've always done it. It's always been a value of mine to gain as much knowledge, to build my skill set as much as I could, because I always, again, a little bit competitive, wanted to be the best at whatever I was doing. But I also, I don't think I realized that until the last few years properly, how much your skill set will be the thing that pays you back tenfold. But I was the 18-year-old sitting in marketing events, youngest in the room, flying to fitness expos over in Melbourne and Sydney at like 19, 20. So I have always valued it, even though maybe it wasn't an intention.
Why did you do that at the time? Like fly over to these events. Do you remember what you were thinking?
I think I just realized how much I just don't fucking know. I was like, I need to learn more. I need to be better. And if I am the youngest, because again, I've always been the youngest. I was born in December. I graduated year 12 at 16. I was always the youngest in my class. I ended up being the youngest in the industry. I was the youngest in my PT certificate course, like the whole thing. I've always been the youngest up until now because I'm late 20s. But the main theme here is that if I was the youngest, then I had to prove that I was still good enough. Because otherwise I would hold myself back. And when we have the skills, we're able to share the knowledge to help people more, and then you'll do a better job. And then you will be better than most people in the industry.
How did you turn that gap in knowledge and I guess the fear of not being good enough and that propelling you, how did you turn that into a willingness to go out of your comfort zone and go into these new rooms? Because I know for a lot of people, it's really hard to, it's easier to play the victim card and say, I won't be good enough, or I'm not good enough. I'll just stick to what's comfortable. You know, as humans, sometimes we would prefer a familiar hell, right? So how did you embrace, I guess, the uncertainty and the discomfort associated with, I don't know, flying over and going to these events?
Firstly, took a friend with me, so that was good because I knew it was going to be fun. But I don't know the answer to this. I'm going to say that having that level of confidence was definitely something that didn't get in my way to be like, oh, who am I to be in these spaces? But Actually, yeah, it's naivety. It was my age. It actually was my age. Because I was so young, I was like, I didn't have enough conditioning yet to think, how am I not good enough? Who am I to do that thing?
Did you use the age as like a fuck yeah, like I'm taking it on mantra? Like I'm young, I'm entrepreneurial. And did you use that to accelerate past the, I don't know, the lack of knowledge, but to use that to inspire you?
I would say so, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so what happens next? You go to some of these events, you start transforming your business. So early days, it was mostly personal training.
Yes.
How did that evolve?
So and this is so funny, this speaks so much to my age. Like I was advertising on Marketplace and Gumtree still. Gumtree? For PT sessions. PT, like there wasn't, there was paid Facebook ads. Instagram was kind of a thing. People weren't quite using it for their businesses yet. And I did end up starting like fitness pages for my business. But I then decided that I needed to actually get out of the house more. I needed to market myself better. And I started to work in some gyms around Perth. So funny. I was employed for like a minute. I was employed for like maybe a week at certain gyms as like a casual and stuff. I was like, I hate this. I do not want to be employed. I am here to do my own thing with my own choices. And so I just went into contracting in different gyms. I was ready and old enough to be in the rent system, which if you don't know, you're a personal trainer, you work in a gym, you pay rent in those spaces, which I didn't know at the time, and they don't tell you when you're doing your fitness course. But I was in gyms. I was probably in doing all of that for about my first 4 to 5 years. And I was always doing other things on the side. I was making ebooks and little clean treat side hustle, and it was pretty funny. But I actually, even as soon as I started my PT business, I knew that I was going to own my own studio. A couple of things that I know are destined for my life path truthfully, this is why I'm so big on everything that I do and why I would call myself a holistic in whatever way, whatever I am doing, is because I don't just take the one-dimensional person that's in front of me. We are these ever-evolving 3D, 4D,
5D.
Multi-dimensional humans that are constantly evolving and have so many different facets to ourselves. And deep down under all of the shit, we know exactly who we are and what we're supposed to be doing and what our jobs are here to be. And there are, just a couple of things in my life where I just know that they are meant to be for me in this lifetime. And interestingly, having a studio was one of those things. Like I just knew that it was going to happen. So this is literally 18-year-old me talking. And then fast forward, I was about 22, 23, probably 23. And I was starting to make moves where I was like, I'm so ready for this studio. I've been saving for a while. I was completely self-funded, and I actually started to understand commercial leases and renting a property at that point, which is wild and such a different ballgame. But I knew that I was about ready to do that. And then COVID happened. So it's 2020. I had actually put in an offer for this particular space. I found this space and I was like, yep, this is what I want to do. This is exactly where it needs to be. I knew I was going to change the name. It was all going to happen quite fast. And and my offer got knocked back for the commercial lease, thankfully, because about a month later, COVID happened. And then fast forward about 6 months, and I said to them, so you're going to accept my offer now? That was at the discounted lease rate. And they said, yeah, okay, fine. So they let me sign there for, I think it was 2 or 3 years to start with. And I started my own, completely self-funded, made from scratch, grabbed all my family, my partner at the time, and was like, I need you guys to help me build this studio. And it was a holistic small group fitness studio. So that was 2020. I was building a house with my partner at the same time. That was hectic in itself. And I would say that's where my own evolution, my own personal growth journey, and my own business knowledge grew tremendously tenfold.
Do you feel like because you were doing so much, and you talk about, a lot of action and not being able to reflect as much, do you feel like because you had tipped the scales so heavily towards action, did that slow your growth down at all because you weren't able to identify patterns that kept playing out, or was the action enabling you to learn so many powerful lessons anyway?
Definitely. That was probably when I also started to actually understand the power of journaling, because I did start to document a lot of my life. I had gone through a very toxic narcissistic relationship before I was with my partner at the time then, and after that experience I
Was that 3 relationships? It was
Yes, I was 17, 18 with my first partner.
Yeah.
And then I was 18 to, or like 19 to 20, or 19 to 20 with my second. And then 21 to 26, with my ex-fiancé.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
How was that, like, navigating that amidst the businesses and the action and all these, like, time?
fine. truthfully fine. I think because when you're young, when you're 17, 18, 19, going through what you believe is your first experience of love, you heal from that, you move forward, you learn the lessons, and then you try and do better, and you reflect and you go, how can I avoid that situation again? And then you find what you think, maybe is a level up from that, and a better integrated version, and you attract a different partner in a different relationship. But once you heal from that first heartbreak, the same way that friendships end as well, you start to recognize that every person that is not in alignment with you creates, and that leaves your life, creates space for the right person to come through.
So
I didn't have an issue with navigating that, truthfully.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But with the piece on reflection, how was, like, because you're taking so much action and you sort of you started to journal, but where does self-reflection come into this journey? Because I'm very curious to understand how we can, I don't know, I'm an optimizing sort of person, but how can we optimize growth? It's like, where's that balance of taking action and then reflecting, like, and being able to do it at once? Like, do we have to do X amount of time into something and then reflect, or is it sort of something we can integrate along the way?
Yeah, I believe that it's something that you integrate along the way. You recognize, I call it like a dissatisfaction within yourself. Where is there a point within you that you are uncomfortable about this situation, that this situation makes you feel like shit after you leave it? Are you struggling? Like, there are signs, and the more connected we are within ourselves, you will recognize these different signs of dissatisfaction, which I consider moving in a place of misalignment. It's like everything feels like a push. Everything feels really hard. And when I experience those, the time that I have between adjusting that, recognizing that and adjusting that is incredibly quickly. And I have recognized that that is quite uncommon within people. I'm very grateful that I have that ability, but that comes from practice. That comes from learning a lot of lessons early on. And because I move relatively fast, and I would encourage anyone to try and just go, is well, on that note, it's because you don't get to do this again. Like, you have this one life experience in this moment, and if you're not taking action, then you're staying where you are. And if you're staying where you are and that makes you unhappy, then that isn't going to change most of the time. But in saying that, answering your question, I don't believe that there's a set amount of time. It's not like, okay, do the hardship for like 3 years and then learn for a year and then figure it out. I do believe that it happens all in an integrated space. I call it, it's like cycles and seasons of life. The same way that we have seasons with the weather, we have seasons in our life where we're growing and evolving. And truthfully, Egan, last year was a massive pause moment for me. And the same way that after my studio closed, that was a whole year of pause. So for me, I guess if I'm really analysing it, it's been it'll be like a year or two of action and then a year of pausing, which is very dramatic because I have a lot of pauses and goes in short periods of time as well. But creating space in my life creates space for the reflections and the lessons to come through and to integrate. And so if we're constantly evolving and never pausing and never stopping, then yes, those reflections, those lessons, those cycles may be harder to identify.
How do you understand, or like, how do you, because you've done like from 18 for the
To
next
28.
9 years, but then you had, making a big pause last year after having so much time, relationship, splitting up with your fiance, like, and then having, it's like we talked about the bow and arrow theory, right? And like creating a space and going backwards a bit. I just find I'm interested in how you manage that, because I know for me, if things like that happen in my life, it's the whole like, you're not good enough, or like you can really shame yourself and, use that as ammunition against yourself. So I'm interested in the process of overcoming that. I don't know,
The mental turmoil of not moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had this conversation with a business coaching client of mine yesterday. She, and we've all been through this where, something's happened, totally thrown us off course. We feel like we're just walking through mud, like you're walking through quicksand, and you're like, why does this part feel so hard? And for me, that's when I recognize those certain levels of dissatisfaction that I mentioned beforehand. You have to, it's like, this is where you meet yourself. You have to recognize that as quickly as possible. And it's fine if it takes you a while, but I would say doing something about it as quickly as possible, recognizing that and going, okay, this is the messy part. Either do I continue to walk through this quicksand, or do I fall through and see what happens on the other side? So I would say, for me, recognizing that I'm in that pullback stage and I need to just pause and I need to just integrate, that sitting with that space is what moves me forward quicker. And that's really the mess and where you get to meet yourself the most, because that's when all your shit comes up.
Yeah, I feel like the hard times enable you to get this crystal clear vision of what you
don't want.
Yeah, and just it provides clarity, right? Yeah. Like, I don't know, it just allows you to understand everything in your life. But I think something that we can learn from you, I guess, is how do we develop this relationship with ourselves to trust the feelings that come up and identify this dissatisfaction and then take action from it. Like, it's a messy, messy process, but I'm curious as to your personal journey of strengthening this self-relationship.
If I rewind back to the really toxic relationship, that was, as I said then, that's what started to strengthen my own gut feelings and my own intuition. Because from the start of that relationship, there were certain behaviors that I was like, this doesn't feel right. And everyone has that superpower, every single person. And it's like any muscle. The more you strengthen it, the stronger it is. And because I didn't trust it at the time.
Can you remember any reason why you didn't trust it?
Yeah, 100%. Because I was like, he's hot and he's quote smart and he's going to look after me and he's older and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, oh, he's everything that I'm supposed to date on paper. But that doesn't always mean healthy.
Can you identify anything in yourself that led you to believe that was the ideal person? Because you tell me you're independent and that was your mindset, but now sort of saying that, him looking after you and the ideal version of masculinity, how did you sort of overcome that?
I recognized some of this unhealthy behavior at the start. What attracted me to him was the confidence, the charisma, the charm, the intelligence, and the maturity, especially from having just come like from a, you're 18 years old and you think you're mature and you know nothing. But, you know everything that you can know at that point. You're just very young still. So I was a little bit older. I was about 20 and I was like, oh, this is really sexy. And because my mum and dad were married so young, I think I did have that belief of that you should still find your partner. I do, truthfully, if I am really honest with myself, I wish that I had spent more time in my 20s single, but I don't regret that because I have recognized that relationships, business, and children will be your biggest mirrors for self-reflection and your biggest growth journeys.
And a lot of people stay single to avoid that because relationships, people think they're stuck in relationships, but it's actually like you said, it's a mirror. It's the best opportunity to grow. So I'm curious. Yeah.
So I was still coming in from my own conditioning of I still grew up as a young blonde female who was taught by Disney that I need to find my Prince Charming. So I still grew up with that. I need to find my partner and this is what I'm supposed to look for and this is how I pick the right person. But I don't think I felt like I needed them, but I wanted them. It's like I wanted a partner versus I needed a partner, which I'm grateful for because it meant that I was coming from a full place rather than a empty one. But yeah, I would say that my intuition really peaked at that point because I didn't trust it and I didn't listen to it. And coming back to how I can help anybody listening to this in building that self-trust and that confidence and recognizing those levels of dissatisfaction is there will be little clues somewhere in your life that have told you this is the thing that you should be doing. Ignoring that is probably what has led to some of the dissatisfaction, and I encourage anybody to try and go back and find that. And again, for me, that was I'm going to have a fitness studio. And I won't tell you what the next two are, but you'll see them in the next few years. But I know there are certain things in this lifetime that I'm supposed to do in the same way that, Egan, you would have had I'm going to start a podcast. And there's going to be someone else around the corner I'm going to start a cafe. There are 100% little clues and little glimmers of light in our heart and pools of excitement is what I call it. Things that spark joy, pools of excitement that are in our lives and they're in our lives for a reason. And sometimes it might be confusing if you're someone that has 1,010,000 of those like Egan and myself. But for the most part, just start with one thing that lights you up, that excites you. Follow that. Just follow that pool to wherever it leads you. That's how you're going to recognize it.
I want to backtrack. So with the relationship stuff, I'm reading a lot of books about masculinity and what often hides.
What are you reading?
The Mask of Masculinity
Okay.
by Lewis Howes. But often what is underneath the surface of charming, intelligent, confident, this charisma can often, be like an insecure person who, can't put anyone else. I know I've been in that place before, right? Like you compensate your insecurity with overconfidence and, self-centeredness. So I'm interested specifically what was underneath that mask of his masculinity.
Yeah, massive insecurities, unhealthy behaviors.
What the worst type of relationship attachment that the worst thing is when someone brings their own shit onto another person. Like what I've been better and improved a lot is being able to work through things openly in a relationship with someone. I think that's a massive difference. I think a lot of people go in a relationship with the expectation they need to be perfect instead of working through it together and being open about that and being vulnerable enough to have those conversations. Even in my relationship, like I've had to do that. My partner's had to do that. and it's hard to overcome that. Like, I'm not perfect, but it's not like like most people are aware they're not perfect, but their behaviors and their actions indicate that their inner child is resisting that message. So being able to openly have your behaviors and your communication speak and be like, no, I don't have it figured out. Let's work through this issue together. Let's grow together.
Yeah.
Is really, really difficult. And I don't think.
And yeah, very unique.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, relationships are mirrors. I'm actually very, very intrigued though. Like from that experience and then into this other experience, into a conscious separation with this misalignment. Like, I don't know, this really, really intrigues me how that can occur.
Yeah. So I would not change any of my relationships at all, because any experience that I have ever had has shaped me into the human that I am and taught me the lessons that I have. And as I said, without that unhealthy relationship, I wouldn't have attracted a healthy one. And without the previous one, then I wouldn't have understood my intuition. And from that moment forward, when I did when I did break up with the unhealthy person, I was very much like, I will trust my gut whenever I feel it from this point forward. And I genuinely would not have experienced that if I didn't go through what I went through. So and then with my conscious separation, again, like it was, for anyone listening, I was with a partner for 4.5 years, built a house, got engaged, separated at the start of last year. And that was rough. That was hard. That was probably one of the most challenging things I've ever been through in my life. But I, again, wouldn't change it for where I'm at now, because, again, it's made me who I am. And Egan and I were actually talking off the mic about how when you transmute or alchemize, as in mix everything together, the good and the bad, and can take it for what it is, that's when true healing and true forgiveness can occur. So I encourage anybody that's listening, if you're holding on to specific things from your past and it's feeling really heavy, or it still brings up a lot of spite or guilt or regret, I encourage you to find a way to integrate that with forgiveness and appreciation for who you are now as a human being, because without that, you wouldn't be who you are.
How do two individuals consciously separate and do it from a place of love and not anger? Because it's so easy to point fingers and play the victim card, both people in life. And how does that look?
A conscious separation is intentionally choosing to separate for the greater good of two people, and again, doing it from a place of love rather than spite and hate. When you're, and I don't mean to scare anyone listening, but when you're 21 or 20 and you are dating somebody, you are a very different person at 21 than you are at 27, 28. And growing and evolving together is incredible and is doable. But most people will change so much that they forget to ask and actually recheck in, like, what does my future partner look like? Like, what do they, not physically, but what do they do? How do they move through this world? What are their values? What is the future that I want for myself? And when I was 21 and just started dating my partner, I was like, I wasn't looking for my future husband. I mean, I guess subconsciously you just are, but I didn't ask myself, what does my future husband, like, what does that involve? And I had certain values that, not that you have to have the exact same values as your partner, I must profess, because we're all very different people, but there are certain parts of you that you will want emphasized by your partner, whether that means that you're bad at something and they're good at something, so you bring each other up together, or maybe it's you have this big vision and you want someone else who has that same big vision. And we always had conversations about, children and marriage, and 100%, because you're an adult, you have decisions to make. And when I was talking about my future when I was 21, I was like, oh, I'm sure I want kids when I'm 26. I'm sure we'll be married by then. I'm sure we'll have a house and all of that. And that came closer to my reality, and I paused for a second and I could feel that, again, that dissatisfaction within me and gone, fuck, I don't know if that's what I want. That was horrifying, incredibly, incredibly confronting. And it just took mature, emotional conversations between two adults who genuinely loved each other to come to a conclusion. And that conclusion was things would be fine if we stayed together, but things would also potentially be better if we separated because one of us are giving up our truth.
It's like the maturity almost intimidates me. It's I don't know. It's
unheard of.
There's
Yeah.
so many I can just imagine. I can't understand on that level, but like the emotions, there's like the grief of losing the future that you didn't have. There's the love you still have for them. So there's like the hope that you could somehow work it out. And then there's like the disappointment. Oh, there's just so many emotions.
Yeah, this is so funny. I don't think either of us intended on having this deep of a relationship conversation at the start of today, but I'm here from it, and I hope that anybody listening to this gets something from it, and feel free to reach out if it does resonate. But I'm not gonna lie, it was fucking hard. It was deep. It was messy. It was ugly. It was confronting. Is really, it was massive, and I will never discredit that. But again, I remember holding on to that inner knowing that this was the right decision, and I knew that what I was wanting was different than what was available. And I had to literally integrate that lesson from when I was 21 in the when I was 19, 20 in that unhealthy relationship, to be like, you fucking know this feeling. You have been there before. Have this life and move forward if you want to. You know, white picket fence, how beautiful, amazing. And this is the thing, is like, some people genuinely want that. That's why I was like, I'm not for him, because there is someone out there that goes, I want a child. 100%, undoubtedly, no second guess. I wasn't that. So
What was it to do with, was that one of the main things?
Yeah, it was one of the main things. Yeah, it was timing of children. And he was 30 and I was 20. Well, actually, he was almost 30.
So that was the guiding light for you, that intuition. I think it's quite powerful. But I think in this modern day and age, I think that's what a lot of people lack the most, is that belief. And that's saying I have strengthened so much in the last year. I feel like once you do a lot of this work, and a lot of it's just self-awareness. I feel like it's just like you'll go through so many experiences, but you'll think so many things, you'll feel so many things, but if you're not reflecting and strengthening that, I actually think it does take a bit of awareness to build that. It's not just like you go through it and you've strengthened that intuition. It's actually an awareness to build that.
Definitely. Self-awareness, truthfully, if I'm being brutally honest here, is one of my favorite things that a person can possess, because most people don't have it. Self-awareness, the ability to recognize your behaviors, your thoughts, your cycles and patterns playing out, and it makes for emotional intelligence as well. Something that I haven't said yet is that my studio was literally called Equilibrium, which means the balance between the mental and emotional state. But deeper than that, it was called EQ for short. And emotional intelligence is also called your EQ. So it was a little bit of a serendipitous moment. But I value self-awareness more than most things. And people that aren't willing to recognize, own, or want to change their shit is something that I deeply struggle with, truthfully.
How do you keep going outside your comfort zone after these? I know when people go through hard experiences, it's so easy just to retreat, but how do you keep showing up time after time and putting yourself back out there?
I haven't thought about the answer to this question. I think it's that knowing of so much is available to us. And if you don't keep going and put yourself out there, then you don't get that level of fulfillment. And fulfillment lights me up every day. Like, it doesn't always look fun. Like, for example, one of my best guy friends, he's like, do you know what I've realized, Kirst? That me working 14-hour days, hustling my ass off and making this business work makes me more fulfilled than if I was to like stop and relax and like chill. So fulfillment looks different for everybody, and recognizing what that feels like for you is very important. But yeah, for me, I realized that the fulfillment that I received from my hard work, from putting myself out there, from growing the person that I am, is what makes that worth it.
And I believe you have to experiment with a range of experiences to understand what brings you that fulfillment
Definitely.
too. There's an element of like, how do I make the right choice? I'm in my 20s. I'm going through life. People are telling me to do this. Society's telling me to do this. I'm feeling these things. How do I make the right choice? How do I, do I go down this traditional path? Do I listen to this voice? Is it a voice of reason and logic, or is it an inner voice, or is it a place of insecurity? How do I figure out and identify the truth that to all this? Because it's a mess. Life's a mess. It's a roller coaster. How do I know and make the best decisions? And it's difficult, but I truly believe, and I'm sure you'll be able to relate, like, it's that self-awareness piece. It's putting yourself into the arena and being courageous enough to put yourself out there. Because I asked you the question, I said, how do you keep putting yourself back out there? And, you said, I haven't thought about it. But, I mean, the answer to me is simple. You're courageous. That's what it is.
That is actually one of the most beautiful things anyone can ever say to me, courage and having a relationship with fear is missing, and resilience actually is really where that plays into. Most people are really missing that relationship with fear, and recognizing that just because something's scary, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. And this is why I teach a lot on nervous system regulation as well, and understanding that you have to actually, I'll share this with you guys because it's really cool. But I heard this thing, and it did actually transform my relationship with fear, and therefore make you more courageous. Fear is false events appearing real. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, fuck, so true. So I'm going to get out of my own way now, because most of the time we're so anxious towards the future that we can't even enjoy our presence at the present moment now. And as you said, putting yourself in the arena is very uncommon and very hard, but you learn how strong you are as a human being. And something that I read, one of my favorite books ever, is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. It's beautiful. And something she said in there is, as mothers, well, not me specifically, as human beings, I'll rephrase it. As human beings, our job is to walk through the fire and recognize that we are fireproof. So rather than be so afraid of it and stare at the flame and avoid it as much as we possibly can because it's a little bit hot, we need to walk straight through it, come out a little scathed and a little bunged up, but you genuinely recognize your own resilience, you genuinely recognize your own courage, and you start to politely ignore fear as it's coming up and move anyway.
Everything is a story, and with anything there, I think something we underestimate is that there's not just one way to go about it. So let's say you have a difficult thing in your life. The power of mindset and all of these things we're alluding to is the way you can overcome something all depends on your ability to go through it. And you might think, well, no shit, but truly realizing that is from having that self-awareness. And I've learnt that lesson just from something like ice baths. Like when I first went into an ice bath, 3 degrees, like put your hands under for 10 seconds, you listen to that voice, that story that is, get out, you're going to die. This is uncomfortable, run away. And now I've done like 200 and I do them easily through pain. I don't listen to that story. I can fight back against it. And it teaches me this powerful lesson that the voice that comes to my head, my ego, the fear, it's all a story. It's constructed by my nervous system, my ego, to keep me safe, to make me run away from the discomfort of uncertainty. But the power is you actually have a lot more control over that story, and you have the tools to go through life in a much more fulfilling way. But if you don't step into courage, you'll never be able to truly realize this lesson. Because I know for me as a logical person, I read so many self-help books. I read like 20 or 30 when I was in my early phases of self-help, and my life didn't really transform until I actually stepped into the emotions, into the arena, because logically you can understand what you have to do, whether it's going to the gym and following a routine, it's having a difficult conversation. But vulnerability is a doing word. It's the showing up when you don't know what's going to happen. It's when you don't know how it's going to play out. And I think as a logical person, someone who spent a lot of time overthinking, I've had to realize that the only way is through.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you were talking before, I was actually thinking about how, like we were saying, most people don't get in the arena, and no matter how many books you read and how much work, quote, you do, unless you're actually doing something physically in your life and changing it, you're just always going to be where you are. And yeah, I believe that there's only so many books you can read before you have to start moving.
Okay, so if someone's listening and, they resonate with this, they're like, that's me. Like something feels a bit off. Logically, I know there's things I should be doing, and I want to be more courageous. I want to trust these feelings, but practically I don't know what to do. What would your advice be?
Where to start? So I will make this, I'll go short and I'll go long. Short version is, that's fine. There's actually nothing wrong with that. It's now your opportunity to change if you're feeling this. But the quickest way I can explain the next steps is follow the threads of excitement. Truthfully, that sentence changed my life. That was when I recognized that so many parts of my life weren't bringing me joy, and we have to take responsibility for that. No one else put me there. That was my own fault. And that does not mean be impulsive, rage quit everything and totally change. But I mean, maybe it does mean that as well, if that's something that's been on your heart for a long time. But the extended version of this is, it's time to start the work. And that work comes from, who are you underneath all of the conditioning? Where did you come from? That is through journaling and understanding yourself and your stories. That is recognizing where the levels of dissatisfaction are. And, maybe it's your job, maybe it is your relationship. And again, I'm not saying that relationships are always meant to be perfect and amazing and easy, because they're definitely not. And anyone that's been in them understands that entirely. But recognizing that you are moving where you want your life to be, or maybe you're not moving where you want your life to be, is recognizing what next step can I take to start getting myself there. So maybe it's enrolling in a course, maybe it's getting yourself out of your comfort zone. And on that note, changing your scenery in any regard will totally transform your perspective. Whether it's 5 days in Bali, going to a new gym, whatever it is, just change your environment, get out of your own way, and go and experience something different.
I think people don't realize that it takes a lot of vulnerability to feel joy. I think a lot of us are conditioned to either put other people before us, put their needs before us, or follow what we think we should be doing in order to be happy, the traditional pathways to fulfillment. But I think truly trusting that feeling, enjoying, following those threads of excitement takes a lot of vulnerability. So yeah, I think that's great advice, and I think it applies a lot to my life. And I think anyone who's made massive changes, they follow the things that they love that brings them fulfillment. Because yeah, it does take courage, even though it's in a positive direction. I think you're breaking away and you're removing the shackles of a lot of conditioning and a lot of these layers and masks that we have to put on.
Definitely. And just because it's not easy, like, don't mistake an easy for the right thing to do either.
Wait, what does that mean?
As in, it doesn't have to be the easiest option doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. So we want to embrace some of that hardness. And as you said, it is that you're removing the shackles, you're learning the unconditioning, and that stuff is challenging, and it is difficult, and it is hard. But typically when you're leaning into a more joyous life, a more aligned life, it feels lighter, not necessarily easier.
I think at the peak of those moments, like, there should be like a flow state to them, like a love and a presence. But there's always discomfort from moving and change, and it's always going to be difficult. And even the most beautiful things in life, there's going to be the ups and downs and the ebb and flow, but there's that feeling, that sense that it's right. And as you said before, strengthening that allows you to develop confidence in that. But there's no better time to start than today.
Absolutely. Yeah. And plot twist, my studio ended up having to get closed down, not because of COVID, for other reasons. And I remember at that exact point in my life, I was like, oh, my future's gone. That was horrendous, but it was happening so quickly, so fast, that I was like, I feel like I'm a piece, like a chess piece being moved around the board, and I can't control it. That's genuinely how I felt at that point. And coming back to the feelings of joy and excitement, I remember the lightness that came with removing that responsibility. And truthfully, I'm just recognizing, as we're having this conversation now, that I have lost what I thought was my future more than once in my life, and recognizing, I guess, from a place of comfort, to know that I've been okay every time since, knowing that the person listening to this is going to be okay every single time after it happens as well.
I think we underestimate how okay we're going to be, but also how much we change. There's a lot of powerful studies that show, like, we overestimate, like, how much we've changed in a short space of time, but we underestimate how much we're going to change in the future. Like, we just, like, even now, like, I look at my future, and you don't pigeonhole yourself, but you sort of you underestimate how much your current actions are going to, like, how much you're going to evolve. And I'm sure you can relate that to being in your early 20s to your late 20s. And I probably look at my early 20s and I'm like, oh, this is where it's going to play out. But you have sort of no idea the sort of natural evolution.
Yeah. Coming full circle with our conversation, the level of peace that can bring you when you choose to lean into it is how to actually enjoy presence and mindfulness and the day-to-day life that we're in currently.
I think, how do you incorporate, I know for me at the start of my journey, I was fueled by a lot of, I started reading a lot of Mark Manson and got really into the existential. I genuinely believe I had an existential crisis, because circulating my mind for a week or so, every thought was about death. It was actually pretty scary, to be honest. And it's almost like it detached me from what I thought I had to do and enabled me to start, chasing after a life I really wanted. But I think death's a great perspective provider. I think that has enabled me to, it allows you to appreciate things, but also can act as the catalyst to fuel you to take risks too.
100%. Egan, do you want to know something crazy?
What?
When I was at the cafe before coming here, a hearse actually drove past.
Really?
Yeah, I was literally just standing out on the road and like straight past is a hearse, and I was like, oh, that person's done. And that is, again, as beautiful or as existential as you want it to make it. I would say I have a relatively healthy relationship with death, more than most people. And I would recommend anyone who's listening to this. Actually, I haven't read this book, but I've heard some insane outcomes from this and life-changing moments for people. But there is a book called The Wish of the Dying, or the dying's biggest regrets, something like that. So search those books.
Is this to do with the top 5 regrets?
Yeah, that's it. Top 5 regrets of the dying.
This was a study. It was a study done by, I think it was an Australian psychology lady. Yeah, she interviewed a couple thousand people and found their top 5 regrets.
I think anyone who feels like they're struggling to take action in this lifetime should read a book like that to really put a fire up your bum to be like, I don't get to do this again. And it's really interesting we're even having this conversation because it is something I think about a lot. And especially during COVID, I made certain decisions during that time, and I truthfully got to a point where I was just like, if I actually die from COVID, then it's just meant to be what it is. Like, that's actually just meant to be how I go. And I was so okay with that. And it was like really scaring everyone else around me, I think. But I would recommend everyone to actually understand their own mortality. And yeah, it is a very existential crisis sort of way, so that you do start to actually enjoy the life that you have, and you actually start to get out of your own way and move. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think it has enabled me to take risks. But yeah, it can be scary. It can be scary to think about, but
yeah, it's not comfortable.
Most
Most people don't talk about it.
Yeah.
That's why we're here today. This has taken a rapid turn, and we hope that we are helping you.
All right, do you want to pull these cards? Because
Yeah, I'd love to.
often a good conversation flows. So what we do is we pick one from these 3 and we answer.
For ourselves, or
Yeah, for ourselves.
you can go first. I've spoken a lot today.
I'm trying to find. Jeez. Oh, jeez, that's a. They always. Sometimes they come to you, but they're normally, from my experience, I say this every time. If someone's a listener to every episode, they'll probably get annoyed. I say the same thing, but it always comes to you.
It might be someone's first time here, though.
Yeah.
So we're holding 3 cards in front of us right now, and Egan is making us pick one.
Yeah, but usually there's a. Wow, this is going to be actually a good conversation. Mine is, actually, I need to think of my answer.
Should we pause?
Yeah, well, I'll give you my 3. The person who taught me the most about love, a relationship I need to let go of, and then the one I'm going to answer is, it's not lying when. Because I think, especially when we talk about relationships, like, the truth is so, so biased. So I'm going to say it's not lying when you believe it's your truth. And let me explain that. I had a bloke come on the podcast and he gave me this framework for life. He said it's all true. And what he means by that is everyone has their own story about the world, themselves, and their experiences and what they believe is true. So I don't believe it's lying if someone truly and honestly, wholeheartedly believes something, even though it is so objectively apparent to you that they're wrong. Because through their own conditioning, through their own shame and subconscious problems, believe it to be the truth. Now, you can't force someone to change. You can hold up a mirror and you can express things in a healthy way. But sometimes people aren't willing to change and they aren't the right people for you. You can't force someone to change. So to me, it's not lying when someone believes it's their truth. You can play a role in helping them know that, change their reality, but you can never force someone to. And there's a lot of, I don't know, it can provide a lot of peace when you let go of that pressure on yourself to always force someone to see the world the way you see the world. And I think in relationships it happens all the time. Like, you're not meeting my needs, and they're like, no, I am. And then it's like, I know for me, when I take a step back and I actually hear their perspective, their truth, you actually realize that you sometimes are in the wrong and taking ownership for that. But like, it's so, when we get so defensive and we're unable to understand where they're coming from, no one really benefits from that. But I don't know. I don't believe it's lying if someone truly, honestly believes it's their thing. I think it's just part of their evolution. They're right now, they're not in a mental capacity to understand that. It's just like if you're in toxic relationships, it's like objectively this person, like narcissist, prime example, objectively terrible human being, but they don't believe it to be the truth. So how can you say that they're lying when they believe they believe wholeheartedly that they aren't that person? You want so hard to prove them wrong, but you can't. So it's like, is it lying? What is the truth anyway?
That's actually such an excellent conversation. I don't have anything to add to that because you summarized that perfectly. It's just a really interesting perspective. Do you know, on that note, this comes back to the self-awareness conversation. One of my favorite things is being able to have different opinions than other people, and acknowledging that and being okay with that.
That's a hard bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being okay with it.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, like, cancel culture, and, someone can have the belief that you're saying and someone will still fight you. Like, yeah, but narcissists are just wrong all the time. Like, that's not necessarily true, but someone might believe it. And it's like, you can have, and this is, I guess, emotional maturity and maturity in general. You can have an opinion, you can have a belief, and it's totally okay for them to be different to other people's and for you to accept someone and meet them where they're at regardless.
And my beliefs and opinions change all the time, and I'm open-minded to be wrong. I think early on I wasn't, like I was really closed off, like I know things, but now I'm a lot more open-minded, but I still have conviction with what I currently believe, or else I'll just be on the sidelines my whole life. Like, the whole point of putting myself out there is to learn. It's like I said, I'm open-minded to be wrong, but I'm not going to let my, not knowing everything hold me back from still speaking my current truth. It's just knowing that it can change because we don't know everything, do we?
Yeah, being a student of life is one of the biggest blessings I think I ever understood. I was like a classic, like, I want to know everything, I have to know everything, or I'm not doing my best if I'm not doing well, or I'm dumb if I don't know the answer to something. But acknowledging your power and of, I don't know the answer to that, so good. So beautiful.
That's why I went into psychology. Like, it was the whole, if I could understand why everyone is the way they are, then I won't have to feel negative emotions. I just understand it logically. So I'm entitled to skip the feeling phase of life because I understand, like, why people are treating me poorly or why I didn't succeed in something. Logically, I understand everything. So, guys, I don't have to feel. But you realize that that's not reality and you have to feel things, but yeah.
Egan, I can't choose one. Can you pick one for me? I'm very nervous. I avoided some of these.
I'm the most judgmental when it comes to...
Oh, that I did think of an answer for this, and that actually ties in perfectly with what we were just talking about, ironically. I'm the most judgmental of myself, which is ironic given the whole conversation that we've just had. It probably sounds like I am okay with everything that I go through and I don't hold judgment for myself, but that is a very, very new thing for me. I still, like every other human being, get very... Who are you to do this thing? Who are you to take this move? How dare you leave this relationship? How dare you, make this money or share it? Like, whatever it is, every judgment within myself comes up just as much as everybody else. And recognizing that voice has honestly it's been an age thing, and it's been a lot of conversations with myself to be like, is this true? And if there's anything I can give someone listening to is take yourself through a process, and this process of recognizing if this voice is yours or if it's just the imposter syndrome or the ego is speaking is, firstly, is it 100% true? For example, me pivoting into business coaching with fitness professionals and wellness-based entrepreneurs is I literally was like, who am I to like coach these people? And I was like, hang on a second. Like I really had to properly have conversations with myself to be like, I have been doing this for 10 years. Like I have built multiple businesses with this. I have bought my ex out of the house and self-funded my own mortgage. Like these are huge moves that most people don't get to do. And I had to have these conversations with myself to be, is it true? Like I'm not smart enough to do this thing, or I'm not intelligent enough to teach this thing, or whatever it is. Ask yourself, is it 100% true? So even, again, maybe it's the relationship. Am I truly unhappy in this relationship? The answer is probably no. Maybe you're unhappy with another part of your life. But coming back to the conversation, the judgment that we hold on ourselves is not something that goes away. It's something that you learn to navigate and communicate and process within yourself.
That's something I'm recently navigating, is I hold very high expectations on myself. And I think a lot of people in the entrepreneurial world who want to take risks and they want to transform their life, like they see the world a certain way, so they hold this huge expectation on themselves. So it's easy to be like, oh, have compassion for yourself, and I'm big on that and understand and be compassionate toward yourself. But geez, like I still have fucking doubts. I still have negative thoughts. It's the ebb
all the time.
It's just I have a bigger army to fight back, grow my army. And the thing you got to understand is when you actually start making big moves in life, the negative thoughts, they become bigger. I've heard this analogy. They become dragons. The dragons get bigger because you're not just starting a podcast. I don't know what I've been doing in 3 years, but for you, for example, like these moves you make are gonna get bigger and bigger, but the army and the mindset and the evidence you have in your life to fight back against those thoughts just grows. But then objectively, your life is in such a transformed position. But the whole process of fighting back and combating negativity in your thoughts and hard emotions, it's a timeless thing that you're going to have. But I think it's not resisting that. I think I went into self-development and you want to sort of avoid that. You're like, oh, if I learn logically how to process, do all these things, like it'll be easy. But it's not. And it's not about it being easy, but it's understanding that not everything that is hard is worthwhile, but everything that is worthwhile is hard.
Yes. And I would say there's been a lot of hard in my life, which is why, again, coming back to that conversation of fulfillment, that's why everything feels so worthwhile. That's why every move has felt like it's going to pay back tenfold, and it's going to be worth it, and it's going to fill my cup up or fulfill me in a different way or evolve me in a different light. And so any of the judgments that come up for myself now, I just find them really fascinating, and I just meet myself with a lot of again, yes, compassion, but also I go, then between you and I, Egan, and anyone that's listening to this that would consider themselves, a high performer or a big optimist and someone who really wants to live a big full life, is use that as your superpower now. I think too often we're trying to get rid of all of the negativity and all the doubt and all of that, but you can also use it, so long as it's not in a detrimental way, you can also use that as fuel. Like they are put on our hearts for a reason. Not everyone operates this way. And so the judgment that I held around as a personal trainer, I was never a bikini model. I was never walking around I didn't have a six pack. I didn't go through a comp prep or anything like that. And that's very, very uncommon within the industry. And so I held a lot of judgment around my body for a long time. I think that held me back for a really long time. I held a lot of judgment around, again, like my age, around my mind, around my ability to pivot and grow and change. But because I had that self-doubt, I got to meet myself at a deeper level, find out, is this actually true, yes or no? The answer is generally no. And then I got to use that little bit of tapped energy of, okay, fuck, if you don't think you're the best, be the best. Prove it, go for it. And thankfully, in a non-detrimental way, that has helped me to evolve in my own processes.
What you resist will persist. I think we suppressed the hard emotions, the hard experiences, but we forget how quickly they're going to reappear in a different form. So it's the whole thing I spoke about before, like the only way is through. And there's so much fulfillment that comes from going through that and overcoming that. And I don't know, for me, I'm a very, very extreme person, like with feelings. Like I ride there's highs and there's lows. And I think this is how I used to operate. I rode the highs because that's easy, but I numbed the lows.
Yeah.
And that prevented me using that as fuel. I think a lot of people do that, especially now how easy it is for instant dopamine hits and to distract yourself. But I think, I don't know, we're all looking for the fun parts of the ride, but we all don't want to go through the scary bits of it. So it's like, I don't know, if you don't go through those lows and actually go through them and you numb yourself for them, you're not going to fully not only appreciate, but you're probably not going to get those highs because it's momentum, right? It's energy. You go down, that's the energy that uses you to get back up.
Have you heard of the word duality?
Yeah, like
polarizing.
Polarity.
Yeah, polarity. So I have this deep inner belief and mantra that I use within my life, and that is, with extreme highs comes the extreme lows, and not in like a really bad negative way. But if I want, and this goes for people listening, if you want the success and you want the acknowledgement and you want to be seen and you want to make money and you want to take risks, you are going to have to go through the lows because they cannot come without the other. And this is the law of duality. Like with the highs comes lows. So the lower you're willing to go, the higher is going to be worth it. And that's not something I've ever shied away from because I learnt that at a really young age. And because I learnt that, I was able to go, this low won't last forever. Recognizing this high won't last forever either.
I think that's an important one. They did so many powerful studies on like mice and where they manipulated them by like drowning them, and they showed that when they pulled them out from drowning, it instilled this belief that they would survive and they'd be okay in the end. And apparently I'll quickly explain the study. It's pretty cool. So they got a group of, I don't know, rats and mice. Tell me the difference. I don't know. Split them into two. And one of them, they just put in water and they drowned. And pretty unethical study if you ask me, but they timed how long it would fight and try and stop itself from drowning. And I'm not sure of the exact time, but it was something like 30 minutes, right? And then for another group of mice, they put it in, and then after a certain amount of time, they pulled it up. And that now instilled the belief that they could survive. So then when they put the mice back into the water, they had hope that they would be okay if they just kept fighting. They lasted like 24 hours, like an incredible amount of time more. So when you're going through difficulty, if you can attach onto faith or hope that things will eventually get better, and they always do, you'll be surprised at your ability to go through them.
Definitely. And as we said earlier, resilience is probably one of the most underutilized skills that a human can develop. And you only get that by going through those difficult things. And then that's when you get to develop faith and hope that you are always going to be okay.
100%. I spoke with the guest yesterday about like the region in the brain that grows when you do things you don't want to do. It's like the willpower muscle, like the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Like it literally grows when you do something you don't want to do, which just proves on a biological level that we have this capacity to become resilient and, slay the dragons in our lives more and more when we when we try and conquer them.
Yeah.
Mm.
Exciting stuff. So at the end of the day, you're going to be okay.
Any-
As cliche as that is.
Any concluding thoughts?
No, just really grateful to be here. And having wrapped up a conversation around mental health, please understand that there are always people you can reach out to. There is always someone that will have your back, and you will always make it through it. Even if you feel like your darkest days are your heaviest, you've survived every single other one of them since then.
100%.
That have come before it.
I think that's a lesson I definitely learnt is you don't have to do it alone. Like a lot of these big things I'm doing in my life, like I've got so much stability outside of like the business. Like if I'm taking a risk with business, podcasting, other aspects, like my foundations are strong, like exercise, eating, relationships, that holds you in good stead. You don't have to, it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Not everything has to be thrown away with that, that pursuit you want to take a risk with.
Yep. Just keep taking risks.
All right. Thanks, Kirsty. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Egan.